On a brisk October morning, Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida, made her way to the Secret Service headquarters in Washington, D.C. Having recently transitioned to a consulting role that frequently involved liaising with various federal agencies, Bondi's presence at such establishments wasn't unusual. However, today was different. She wasn't scheduled for a routine meeting or a consultant's assessment. Instead, she was responding to a mysterious invitation that had landed on her desk the previous day, bearing only the Secret Service seal and the words, "Your intervention is urgently required." As she approached the imposing glass building, the chill in the air seemed to mirror her apprehension. Greeted at the entrance by Agent Clark, a man known more for his seriousness than his warmth, Bondi was quickly ushered through the security checkpoints. The building's interior was stark and utilitarian, with the distant hum of activity typical of a place that never truly slept. "Ms. Bondi, thank you for coming at such short notice," Agent Clark said, his voice barely above a whisper as they walked through the labyrinthine corridors. "What we're about to discuss must remain between us until further notice." Pam nodded, her curiosity piqued. They stopped in front of a secure conference room. Clark swiped his card, and the door clicked open, revealing a room darker and more austere than the rest of the building. As the door closed behind them, Bondi was aware of the palpable shift in atmosphere. This was no ordinary briefing. On the table lay a series of documents and photographs, illuminated only by the soft glow of a single overhead light. Clark pointed to the chair at the head of the table. "Please have a seat." Pam took her place, her eyes scanning the documents before her. Photos of a clandestine facility, blueprints of an intricate network of underground tunnels, and a series of memos written in urgent, cryptic tones. "We uncovered something we weren't supposed to find," Clark began, his face shadowed by the dim lighting. "An operation hidden even from us, within our own ranks. And we believe it goes all the way to the top." The gravity of his words hung heavily in the air, Bondi's mind racing to piece together the implications. "How do I fit into this?" she asked, her voice steady despite the growing unease. Clark's eyes met hers, a mix of resolve and concern etching his features. "Because, Ms. Bondi, we think this operation targets not only key figures in the government but also those who once held positions of power, like yourself. We need your insights, your experience. You've fought corruption before, and we need that fighter now more than ever." As the magnitude of the situation dawned on her, Pam felt a resolve awaken within her. Whatever this shadow operation was, she would help unearth it. But as she was about to delve deeper into the documents, Clark's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. "They know you're here," he said tersely. "We need to move you to a secure location immediately." Before Bondi could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor. The story was just beginning, and already, the stakes were higher than she could have anticipated. As the footsteps grew louder, Agent Clark acted quickly, ushering Pam Bondi through a hidden door at the back of the room. They entered a narrow, dimly lit hallway, the sound of their pursuers muffled by the thick, reinforced walls. Pam's heart raced as they navigated through the secretive passageways of the headquarters, a place she thought she knew but now seemed as foreign and menacing as the documents she had just begun to examine. They emerged into a small, nondescript room filled with surveillance monitors and communications equipment. "This is one of our safe rooms," Clark explained, locking the door behind them. He moved to a console and began scanning the monitors, searching for any sign of their pursuers. "We have about 10 minutes before they figure out where we are. We need to use this time wisely." Pam, still catching her breath, approached the console. "Who are they? And why would our own people be involved in something like this?" Clark turned to her, his face grave. "We believe a rogue faction within the Secret Service has been compromised. They're involved in an operation known as Project Nightshade. It's supposed to be a black ops program aimed at eliminating threats to national security. But based on what we've uncovered, they've twisted its purpose. They're targeting individuals they deem threats not to national security, but to their own agenda." The severity of the betrayal was palpable. Pam felt a cold chill as she realized the danger they were in. And they think I'm a threat? Not just you. Several others, officials, former officials, anyone who could potentially expose them. Your work against corruption has made you a target. Pam's mind raced, the lawyer in her piecing together the legal ramifications, even as the pragmatist sought a way out. What's our next move? Clark was already ahead of her. We need to get you to a congressional oversight committee. They need to hear about this directly from someone of your credibility. But first, we need to gather more evidence from the secure archive here. It's risky, but it's the only way to ensure this ends today. Nodding, Pam steeled herself for what was to come. Lead the way. They left the safe room, Clark guiding them through less traveled corridors towards the archives. The tension was palpable. Each corner they turned could be walking into a trap. When they finally reached the archive room, Clark keyed in an access code, and the door slid open silently. Inside, rows upon rows of digital data banks hummed quietly in the cold air. Clark led Pam to a terminal, quickly navigating through layers of security with a practiced hand. Here, he said, pulling up a series of encrypted files. This should have everything we need. As Pam leaned in to look at the files, her legal mind began cataloging the potential evidence. Suddenly, the room was filled with the red glow of an alarm. We've been found out, Clark muttered, looking towards the door. Download everything you can onto this drive, he said, handing her a secure USB stick. I'll hold them off. Pam's hands were steady as she worked the controls, even as the sound of approaching footsteps turned into the distinct click of weapons being readied outside the door. The progress bar on the screen seemed agonizingly slow as she glanced towards Clark, who was positioning himself by the door, weapon drawn. Done, she said, just as the door burst open. As the door to the archive room burst open, Agent Clark took a defensive stance, his weapon trained on the entrance. Pam Bondi clutched the USB drive tightly, knowing it contained evidence that could expose the rogue operation. The first figure stepped through the doorway, gun drawn, followed by two more. Clark didn't hesitate. His warning was clear. Drop your weapons. You're surrounded and under surveillance. Clark shouted, his voice echoing through the tense room. The intruders paused, clearly not expecting resistance. Their leader, a man with cold, calculating eyes, smirked. Agent Clark, you're out of your depth. Hand over Ms. Bondi and the data, and maybe you'll walk out of here. Clark's response was resolute. Not going to happen. Pam, meanwhile, used the standoff to edge towards a secondary exit she noticed on the architectural plans displayed earlier. Her mind raced, strategizing their next move. She whispered to Clark, there's another way out through the maintenance corridor. If we can distract them. Before she could finish, an alarm blared through the building, a fire alarm, triggered by Clark's quick thinking at the control panel before the confrontation. In the ensuing confusion, with the sound of sirens and the flashing of emergency lights, Clark fired a warning shot at the ceiling. Now, Pam, he yelled. Using the chaos as cover, Pam darted towards the hidden exit, Clark covering her escape. They navigated through the dimly lit maintenance corridors, the sounds of their pursuers fading behind the clamor of the building's security protocols. Emerging into the chill of early morning outside the building, they found themselves in a secluded loading dock. Clark quickly led Pam to a nondescript government vehicle. We need to get to Capitol Hill. Now, he said, as they drove away from the headquarters. As Clark navigated the early traffic, Pam processed the morning's harrowing events. How deep does this go, Clark? Who else is involved? Clark kept his eyes on the road, his jaw set. It's deep, and it's dark. But with this evidence, he nodded towards the USB drive in Pam's hand. We can shine a light on it. We just need to get it to the right people without getting intercepted. Reaching Capitol Hill, they parked in a secure underground facility. This place is watched over by an independent security team loyal to the Constitution, not individual agendas. You'll be safe here, Clark assured her. They made their way to a secure briefing room where members of the Congressional Oversight Committee were already gathering, alerted to the urgency of the meeting by secure channels. Pam prepared the evidence, her lawyer's precision surfacing as she organized the data into the most damning sequence. Clark stood by her side, his usual stoic demeanor replaced by a palpable tension about the implications of their revelations. As the committee members filed in, Pam took a deep breath. The next few hours would determine the course of her fight against the corruption that had infiltrated the very agency meant to protect the nation. In the secure briefing room, surrounded by members of the Congressional Oversight Committee, Pam Bondi began to present the evidence collected from the Secret Service archives. The room was thick with anticipation as she inserted the USB drive into the secure computer and projected the contents onto the screen. Documents, emails, and covert operation plans laid bare a conspiracy that seemed to permeate several layers of the Secret Service. As you can see, Project Nightshade was designed as a contingency operation for national threats, Pam explained, clicking through the damning evidence. However, it has been perverted into a tool for personal and political gain, targeting individuals who might expose or challenge the rogue elements within. The committee members murmured among themselves, visibly shaken by the revelations. High-ranking officials being implicated in such activities was not just alarming, it was a direct threat to the fabric of national security. Senator Walsh, the committee chair, a seasoned politician with a no-nonsense attitude, leaned forward. Ms. Bondi, this evidence is explosive. It suggests that the rogue faction has not only infiltrated our security agencies, but also manipulated them to execute illegal operations under the guise of national security. Pam nodded, her face set with resolve. That's correct, Senator. And it's not just an internal threat. This goes beyond our borders, implicating international dealings and potentially endangering our global standing and safety. Agent Clark, standing beside her, added, "We have reason to believe that this is just the tip of the iceberg. The full extent of their operations and plans is still unknown. We need full authorization to dig deeper and root out these elements before more damage is done." The committee members exchanged looks, the weight of the decision before them palpable in the room. Senator Walsh finally spoke. "We need to act, and act fast. This committee will recommend immediate action to the full Senate and the President. We'll need to coordinate with the FBI and the Department of Justice for a thorough investigation." Another member, Congresswoman Lee, who had been silently taking notes, raised her voice. "What about protection for Ms. Bondi and Agent Clark? If these individuals are as powerful and embedded as this evidence suggests, their safety is paramount." Clark nodded. "We have taken precautions, but we'll need secure protection moving forward. This isn't over, and those implicated will not go quietly." As the meeting concluded, plans were rapidly put into place. The committee moved to seal the records and evidence until the formal investigation could be initiated. Pam and Clark were escorted to a secure facility where they would remain under protection until it was deemed safe. As they left the Capitol, Pam felt a mix of relief and foreboding. They had taken the first step towards exposing and dismantling a hidden threat, but the path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty. Yet there was no turning back now. In the days following the explosive congressional hearing, the nation was on edge. News of the investigation into Project Nightshade and the potential corruption within the Secret Service had leaked, despite efforts to keep it under wraps during the preliminary stages. The media swirled with speculation and concern, the public hungry for answers and accountability. Pam Bondi, now under tight security, worked closely with federal investigators, providing insights and helping to decipher more of the encrypted data they had seized. Agent Clark, too, was integral to the process, his knowledge of internal operations proving invaluable in uncovering the breadth of the rogue faction's reach. Amid the unfolding scandal, the president addressed the nation, affirming his commitment to transparency and justice. "Let me be clear," he stated in a solemn broadcast. "Any threat to our democratic institutions and national security will be met with full force. We will root out corruption and restore trust in our law enforcement agencies." Meanwhile, Pam and Clark found themselves at the center of a storm. They were escorted to various secure locations, meeting with key officials and testifying in closed sessions. The evidence they provided led to several high-profile arrests, including top-ranking officials within the Secret Service. Each arrest was a vindication of their efforts, but also a reminder of the danger they faced. As the investigation widened, Pam reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had started as a consultant, unwittingly walking into a den of deceit. Now, she was a key figure in one of the most significant federal cleanup efforts in decades. Despite the risks, she felt a deep sense of duty to see this through. "I never imagined this would be where my path led," Pam confided to Clark during a rare quiet moment. "But I know this is where I need to be. We're making a difference." Clark nodded, his usual stoicism softened by the shared experience. "We are. And we'll keep going until we're sure the threat is completely neutralized." The fight against the rogue faction continued, with more layers of conspiracy uncovered each day. The trials and public hearings that followed would reveal the full extent of the corruption and the measures taken to conceal it. For Pam and Clark, each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to repair the breaches in their nation's security. Months later, as relative calm began to return, Pam stood before a new commission established to oversee reform within the Secret Service. Her role as a consultant had evolved into that of an overseer of the reform process, her experience and steadfastness making her a natural fit. "As we rebuild," Pam told the commission, her voice resolute, "let us remember the lessons of this ordeal. Vigilance, integrity, and transparency aren't just ideals. They are essential components of our security and our democracy." The nation watched and listened, inspired by her courage and leadership. While the shadow of Project Nightshade would always be a reminder of the vulnerabilities that existed, the efforts of those like Pam Bondi and Agent Clark ensured that such breaches would be far less likely in the future. As the sun set over the Capitol, casting long shadows across the monuments of American resilience, Pam felt a cautious optimism. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in many months, it seemed hopeful.